Welcome to Mindshift. I'm Brandon, and today I'm supporting RAINN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. This is the third installment of what I'm calling Giving Beyond Belief, where once a month we make a video and we can get together to do some real good as an atheist community. Of course, if you're a believer watching this, you are more than welcome to contribute as well. If you can't give or you have another cause you're already supporting, no problem. There is no pressure to do so. If you can give, I would ask that you do. But in general, just by being here, you are helping out this foundation today. Just by watching, commenting, liking, or sharing, you not only support my channel, but you will lead to increased ad revenue, which I then will donate at the end of the month. And so with that said, here's the structure for these videos. First, I want to always show you what we did last month, how much we raised, and proof that I gave, not to boast, but of course just for accountability. Then, considering that this is still in part a counter-apologetics channel, we'll talk about where the biblical God fails with this particular topic. And oh boy, does he fail on this one. And because of that failure, because there is no God to help out or to make things right or to save these people, today and over the next month, we get the opportunity to do some good, to do what we can, because we are all we have. Oftentimes, as people deconstruct and deconvert and leave their religion, they realize this, and they're looking for a place where they can put what they otherwise were giving to tithe and putting it to better use than lining the pastor's pockets. Whether by watching or donating, you will be making a difference. So without further ado, last month we covered starvation, and the charity we supported was Action Against Hunger. I was worried that the donations would go way down from the first video we did that was on childhood cancer, where we supported St. Jude. But you guys came through really strong, and we raised over $2,800. I thank you for your generosity, and I am proud to be able to have a platform where we can do this kind of work together. The views for the hunger video, though, were way down compared to the cancer video. And so in terms of ad revenue, it wasn't very much, and so I just gave what I did the first time, which was still double the ad revenue that came in for the cancer video. So I gave $300, which you can see here, which means that through our efforts, we raised over $3,100 towards Action Against Hunger, plus over $4,000 towards St. Jude, and so I'm hoping now with the addition of RAINN, we will be over $10,000 as a community in giving in just the last few months. So thank you again for that. We will talk about RAINN here in a minute, but first I want to present the issues within Christianity when it comes to this topic. The easiest way to do so is just by looking at what the Word of God has to say. And this isn't supposed to be a Tuesday Takedown video, and I'm planning a pretty large video on this channel, A Messenger of Truth, but I'm going to show you a quick clip from him to get us started today.
Your religion rapes and murders children while your cult leaders cover it up, but you do you. Actually, God said, you shall not murder, and Deuteronomy 22 condemns rape. What's fascinating is
I've never seen someone click away so fast, because the rest of the evidence around that particular verse that he cherry-picked is absolutely damning. Let's start with the verse that he has highlighted, which is Deut 22, 25 through 27. Then we'll read the verses before and after it, just like all those good Christians tell us we need to do for correct context. So, starting in 25, it says, "But if out in the country a man happens to meet a young woman, pledged to be married, and rapes her, only the man who has done this shall die. Do nothing to the woman. She has committed no sin deserving death. This case is like that of someone who attacks and murders a neighbor. For the man found the young woman out in the country, and though the betrothed woman screamed, there was no one to rescue her." Get ready for some of the most backwards thinking you have ever heard when it comes to victim blaming and rape in general. In 23, if a man happens to meet in town a virgin pledged to be married, and he sleeps with her, you shall take both of them to the gate of that town and stone them to death. The young woman because she was in town and did not scream for help, and the man because he violated another man's wife. You must purge the evil from among you. So this is in contrast to the following verse that was highlighted that supposedly tells us that God hates rape. No, he hates property crimes that can be proven. That's the only difference. When the woman was in the country, no one would know if she screamed, and thus they default to her presumed innocence. Wow, how gracious of them. But in the city, we'll know she didn't scream. That means it wasn't rape, and that these two both deserve to die. This is absolutely disgusting and ridiculous, but again, it gets worse. Verse 28 here is really where it starts to heat up. "If a man happens to meet a virgin who is not pledged to be married and rapes her, and they are discovered, he shall pay her father 50 shekels of silver. He must then marry the young woman, for he has violated her. He can never divorce her as long as he lives." Now, as sick as it is, I've actually seen this verse used by Christians as well sometimes to say, look, people make mistakes, but look, God is making what man meant for evil for good. She's now protected by marriage, and he can never leave her. Because back then, divorce was permitted, from our immutable God that never changes. So only if the rape is discovered, which is issue number 1, then what? Then the rapist gets permission to marry his victim. I'm sure that's going well for her. Oh, and also we're going to make him pay 50 shekels, because now that the father can't sell her, he needs to be compensated for the destruction of property. That's what this is. is nowhere is the concern on the woman who was raped or the wrongness of rape itself. It has to do with how it affected the father, the property owner. I'm not going to take the time to go through all the verses about where we see what the father can and cannot do with his daughters when he sells them as servants or slaves or property, but that's in there also. And a reason for the additional punishment of him having to marry this young woman is again because she is now worthless. He defiled her. And if her father can't sell her, she then becomes a financial burden. So now she's another man's problem. Again, a punishment, but not for rape, for property crime. So we start with this longer example, and I'm going to rapid fire through some other verses because, one, you can see the Christian apologetics should know better. You think he didn't read the verses before and after, but he has a point to make. Someone calls him out on his God and the issues with that religion, and he says, no, look, actually, here's a single verse that I can point to out of context where you might be able to infer that God is against rape. This is as dishonest as it gets. And I am absolutely beside myself at the idea that so many Christians either A, don't know this is in their Bible because they just won't read it, or B, they refuse to think through these issues for themselves because someone like this man is on a platform saying something that can then let them off the hook. Oh good, someone who knows the Bible better than me has an answer. Those atheists must just be lying. They must just hate God. They just must want to sin. And all to do what in the end? To make excuses for a God that isn't even real, that if he were, clearly is not on the side of protecting people against sexual abuse or setting up a just system to deal with it in the first place. So let's get into some more verses here really quick now that I've made my bigger point. Thanks for bearing with me there. Before we move away from this wonderful fifth book of the Bible, let's go back one chapter. When you go to war against your enemies and the Lord your God delivers them into your hands and you take captives, if you notice among the captives a beautiful woman and are attracted to her, you may take her as your wife. Kill all the young boys, kill all the non-virgin girls, kill all the grandparents, kill all the disabled, kill all the sick, full-on genocide. But the one kind of person you can keep alive is a young virginal girl. And I've pointed this out before, but a lot of people like to think of this as like some 18-year-old who just hasn't been betrothed yet. But in all reality, based off the marrying age of women at this time in these cultures, the non-virgin women would have been probably closer to 15 and under. If you don't think that there were grown Israelite men bloody from war after killing the little brothers and older sisters of these virgins who then pick up some 4-year-old girl to take back to their tent, you would be wrong. Insofar as this story is presented, that would have been the reality. But Brandon, they made them their wives. Like, that's a good thing. They would have probably otherwise starved to death. How generous of them in the midst of their genocide to consider just this group. This is clearly what it sounds like. Sexual slavery. A marriage license doesn't change that. You wouldn't accept that in today's culture. The only reason you accept it back then is because A, it would go against your religion, and B, you think that things were just different in the past. And though there's some cultural context to be true there, if you believe in objective morality, it should still have been wrong to rape little girls. Always. And sometimes I get this conflated with the verse in Numbers 31, 17 through 18. Now kill all the boys, and kill every woman who has slept with a man, but save for yourselves every girl who has never slept with a man. Now, what I don't want to do is get into a ton of apologetic excuses here and go back and forth. Some people will say this was commanded by Moses, but if you go down a few chapters, you'll see that God repeats this same command after, by the way, demanding that a portion of the booty, including people, be given to him. Some people would suggest that looks like human sacrifice, others just as enslaved for his use in the temple, but still recognizing that these men get to choose from the virgins that are attractive to them. We get it from both of them throughout multiple chapters of the most important part of the Bible when it comes to understanding God's view on justice. You can talk about the new covenant and Jesus' death on the cross all you want, but for millennia before that, God had supposedly given these people the law in 5 books, the Torah. Again, if your God is immutable and this is how he felt about things at one point, this is how he always feels about things. You might say contextually he doesn't feel that way about Gentiles, and if that's your big argument, you can have it. But for his chosen people, the ones he called to be a higher standard of morality, this is that standard. When he lays it out, that's unbelievable to me. How are we arguing about the nature of this made-up God? Now, I'm going to share a verse from Zechariah, and it's a prophecy. So many people say, oh, it never happened, as if that's the issue here. But here it is, 14:1-2. A day of the Lord is coming, Jerusalem, when your possessions will be plundered and divided up within your very walls. I will gather all the nations to Jerusalem to fight against it. The city will be captured, the houses ransacked, and the women raped. Half of the city will go into exile, but the rest of the people will not be taken from the city. This is God's plan as punishment for his people. Rape, as punishment, something you're going to see too much of, unfortunately, in the next few minutes. Think about what rape as punishment implies. It implies that, first of all, God has no problem with rape in these conditions. And oftentimes, the punishment is not because of the women doing something, which still would not be an acceptable form of punishment, but at least you would have some kind of an excuse you could build towards. It's usually because of something the men in their life did. And you know what? Here's a direct example of that. 2 Samuel 12:11-14. David has sinned and God will punish him. This is what the Lord says. Out of your own household, I'm going to bring calamity on you. Before your very eyes, I will take your wives, I think there were 8 at this time, and give them to one who is close to you, and he will sleep with your wives in broad daylight. I hope they remember to scream, you did it in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight before all Israel. Then David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. Nathan replied, the Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die. But because by doing this you have shown utter contempt for the Lord, the son born to you will die. So 2 punishments in one. We're killing infants and we're raping wives. What a just God. Don't kill David. Don't kill the man who actually did the action, or the woman he had the affair with, which, by the way, this is what the punishment is for, his affair with Bathsheba, which also contextually you might be able to point to as rape. He saw her, he desired her, he had her. Kill the unborn of that and rape the other wives. This is the word of the Lord. It could not be more clear. I have yet to ever hear one person, I brought this up, maybe this is my 15th time in the 300 videos I have done on this channel, not one person has tried to actually defend this. This is the God you worship, that you call good Father, that you call perfect, just, and loving. Rape is punishment for women who had nothing to do with the crime itself. There's a pretty long excerpt in Judges 21:10-24 that you can read on your own, but here's the gist. And you know what? Do me a favor and just go watch this video. I break down this issue in much more detail. But they commit one genocide, and it only provides them with 400 virgins that they left alive. That's not enough for all the men to marry, but the rest of the tribes don't want to give these men any of their women because they made an oath not to give the tribe of Benjamin any of their daughters. So they say, our hands are tied. So they go to a neighboring town and they just steal. This is the direction. Steal. Wait in the bushes and ambush the women that come out to dance at the festival and take them as your wives. That's an oversimplification that I just did, but read the verse for yourself or watch the video. It's unbelievably disgusting. And the excuse here is, well, read the end of Judges. Man did what was right in his own eyes. It's not like God condones all of this behavior. Yeah, but he didn't condemn it. We have a God that wants you to stone rape victims in the town square because it offends his sense of patriarchal property justice. We have a God who rapes wives in open public as punishment for David making a sin. If this God wanted to say this was wrong or to punish these people, he would have. When he's been so vocal about all the other issues, killing people for picking up sticks on the Sabbath, and then he's quiet during child human sex trafficking, he doesn't get a pass. It's condoned. It's almost getting redundant, but stick with me. Leviticus 19:20-22. If a man sleeps with a female slave who is promised to another man, but who has not been ransomed or given her freedom, there must be due punishment. Yet they are not to be put to death, because she had not been freed. The man, however, must bring a ram to the entrance of the tent of meeting for a guilt offering to the Lord. With the ram of the guilt offering, the priest is to make atonement for him before the Lord for the sin he has committed, and his sin will be forgiven. Now, what was his sin? Read the verse. What was his sin? Was it rape? No. It was having sex with another man's possession. That's it. And the punishment doesn't need to be that severe because it's not like she was free. That's what the verse says. So all you have to do is kill an innocent animal to make up for this thing that you have done, and not because it was bad because of how it harmed her, because of how it may have hurt another man. I wish I were making this up. I wish I had to dig through the whole Bible as some angry atheist trying to make an incorrect point against Christianity and mistranslate and take out of context one little verse that I could barely find a scrap of and say, see, problem. But the bigger problem here is that I risk boring you with all of the very precise and in context verses and examples of just how horrendous this God's views on rape and sexual abuse are. And to that end, I won't share that many more. We'll just cover some high level stuff. There's verses in Exodus about if your daughter that was sold as a slave does not please her new master sexually, she can be traded or discarded. When Amnon rapes his half-sister and David finds out about it, does he punish Amnon? No. A man after God's own heart, not punishing rape that didn't hurt another man. Go figure. In Lamentations 5:11, we see women in Zion and virgins in Judah being raped, framed as part of the suffering allowed by God during this conquest. I did the prophecy in Zechariah, but there's another one in Isaiah 13:16. The women will be raped and the infants will be dashed to pieces. That's divine judgment. God's orchestrating this. It's his prophecy. And after the example we got with David in 2 Samuel, it's just clear. Killing babies and raping women is a great way to punish these men. The women and children are just property to be used as collateral damage. In Ezekiel, we get this absolutely disgusting personification from God of his jealousy for Jerusalem, that she will be stripped naked and raped. It's a horrendous scene spelled out by her many lovers for her idolatry. God is a jealous God, remember? And when she steps out, it's the nastiest scene you can think of. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. No exaggerations. So many verses. That's the issue with thinking that this God, even if he were real, would care or do anything at all for victims of rape or sexual abuse or incest. There's other verses about incest that we didn't get to, but I'm just going to move on. And of course, this can happen to anyone. This can happen to young boys, this can happen to men, this can happen to non-virgins, this can happen across the board. People are people. And sex crime is an unbelievably common thing worldwide and in the US. We're going to get to those stats. And it affects quite literally billions of people. So let's dive into the stats. The easiest and most sickening stat is every 68 seconds, someone is sexually abused. Once a minute. If you have someone in your life who has gone through this, you know the absolute trauma that something like this is. And by the way, these are just the ones we know about, can report on, have information into. This number is probably sickeningly higher. Many people don't even know they were a victim of this. Many people are terrified to report this. Many people won't answer polls honestly, even if it's anonymous, because they don't want to put that on themselves. There's a ton of research into all that, but that'll be a video for another day. Every 68 seconds, there's your urgency for taking action, whether it is just to watch this video or whether you want to click that donate now button. But I've got more stats here, unfortunately, that don't make this any better. Let's start globally, and then we're going to focus in on the US. The charity I chose today, RAINN, is just US based. I'd also like to recommend two charities if we're trying to tackle this from a global level. Equality Now and Women for Women International seems to be the two best that I could find in my research. And we'll go back and forth. You know, St. Jude was kind of a local thing. Action Against Hunger was worldwide. Now we're focusing today on, again, RAINN. I don't know the best way to do this. I'm open to suggestions as we go forward with picking charities in the future. But one of the main reasons I chose RAINN is, above all the others that deal with this, they were the most transparent and the ones that use the money most efficiently, which is always going to be important when I am recommending what other people should give to. So globally speaking, 1 in 3 women will experience sexual abuse in their lifetime. There are over 700 million women alive today that were married before the age of 18. Now, we can talk all day about differences within culture and what the proper age should be and looking at the past and how young it was. But either way, it is a sickening number of women being in situations that very often, if not almost always, leads to marital rape, which, yes, is a real thing, despite what the Bible would tell you. By the way, that stat I gave you about one person being sexually assaulted every 68 seconds, that was just for the United States alone, because that's where we do have the best reporting data. Again, imagine if this was worldwide, and imagine if we actually knew everything. I'm terrified to know what the more accurate number would be. And by the way, sometimes it's hard to compare statistics because they'll say something like sexual abuse, and then there's rape, and rape is defined differently by different organizations about what it means. So it's hard to compare. So I'm just going to give you the stats that I have found that, again, are backed up by good sources, which I've listed. But in the US, 1 out of every 6 women will have experienced attempted or completed rape. 63% of sexual assaults are not reported to the police. So again, hike these numbers up. And I forgot to mention, so sickening, human trafficking at a global level, it's close to 5 million are victims of forced sexual exploitation. By the way, for every 1,000 sexual assaults, 975 perpetrators will walk free. Very low prosecution rates, tons of issues in our justice system. You can say, well, that's not on God. I agree. That's why we should be giving money to do something to helping these victims. Or at the very least, just continuing to raise awareness about this. This is an epidemic beyond almost any other thing. It is insane that this is not discussed 24/7. 13% of all college students will experience rape or sexual assault while attending university. Just last year alone in the military, there were over 20,000 documented cases of sexual assault. You're not safe anywhere. 700,000 children in the US are sexually abused every single year. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys before they reach the age of 18. As the father of a little boy and a little girl, I can't imagine the pain for them, the trauma, the lifelong issues that this would lead to, and the hurt for the family that is supporting them. These numbers I knew were bad, but then you dig in and you're researching and you're taking time to make sure that they're coming from reputable sources and you're comparing, and no matter what the best case scenario is, it's still an absolute hellscape. So if you're a Christian who says, it's just horrible, these things are just horrible, I can't believe they happen, why not condemn your God? Why still worship your God? Why call your God good? Do you not believe the verses that I shared with you? Do you not think they're in the Bible? What truly is your excuse? Christians always try to turn it around. Who are you as an atheist to even say anything is bad? Where do you get your source of morality? And we can argue about that all day. But you, as someone who does have this objective morality supposedly, and will absolutely say that rape is 100% wrong, how do you justify your God? Why the special pleading? Why would your God need special pleading? Why would he need an excuse that you're not willing to give to any human entity? Isn't he above our ways? Shouldn't he be the only being in existence that doesn't need an excuse, that should actually be perfect? Make it make sense. And those are just the physical stats of the actual abuse. Then you get to the trauma, the mental abuse, the psychological toil, the ruined relationships, the inability to have intimacy in many cases, the diseases, the unwanted pregnancies, the PTSD, the suicide. I mean, it's unbelievable, these numbers. 1 in 3 women who have been sexually assaulted contemplate suicide, and 13% go through with it. 94% of women who are raped show PTSD signs within the first few weeks. And if your heart isn't being moved by this, what about your wallet? Do you know how much the US taxpayer paid in cost related to medical care, lost productivity, which is just the grossest thing to think about when you're talking about someone's life, and the cost for the criminal justice system? $122 billion annually is what sexual violence costs the US economy per year. Then, of course, the cultural silence and the victim blaming, everything else that goes along with this is an unbelievable horror, a terror upon mankind, and yet justified by this God of perfect love and truth and justice. So, what can we do? It seems so futile in the face of something so overwhelming, but I would caution you against that kind of fatigue, which is a very real fatigue. The action to opt for nothing, because it seems like nothing could move the needle, is often a very natural response to this kind of thing. But besides just watching the video, if you wanted to donate, you could do so to RAINN, again, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. They are factually the largest anti-sexual violence organization in the US. They operate the National Sexual Assault Hotline, open 24/7, absolutely saving lives of people that would be taking their own life because of the trauma they're dealing with, as well as providing resources and real, tangible, practical help for these victims. They have a proven track record with the highest ratings from third-party charity auditors, the perfect 4-star from Charity Navigator, the Platinum Seal of Transparency from GuideStar, and they are incredibly efficient with their funds here in the US. 93 cents of every dollar goes towards actually helping these victims. And also, I almost forgot to mention, they do so much more than just react after the fact. They are the ones on the front line of the legal system fighting for judicial reform to improve the criminal justice system in handling this. They do a great job raising awareness and providing educational materials that in many cases can help reduce the amount of incidents. The needle does get moved. If you give money to them, it will be used wisely. I know these topics are heavy. I know it's easier to turn a blind eye, but this false God has already turned a blind eye long enough. And by the nature of believing in him, so do many believers. And I am of the mindset that if I am capable of helping and I have the information to be able to do so well, I should take advantage of it. Thank you for anyone who is here. It is appreciated, and you are indeed making a difference too. I'll check back in a month on how we did with the fundraising and what I'm giving from the ad revenue. And until then, keep thinking. I'd like to personally thank all my top tiers of support: my Iconoclast, Alexander, Ann, Boris, Eric, GVI, Joe, Kitboga, Perry, Rachel, Rokkit, Shawn, and Tom; my Humanist heroes, James, Jarrod, Kristi, and Thronus; my Atheist advocates, Caleb, Carla, David, Drew, Jeff, Jeffrey, Lisa, Paul, Sparky, Thomas, and Todd, with a special shout out to all of my secular scholars and free thinkers, and also wanted to acknowledge all of my skeptics and rationalists who are not on the screen. Because of your combined generosity, we're able to help people who are doubting, deconstructing, or deconverting. If you haven't yet, would you please consider joining these fine people?